Hello everybody, this is Havoc with my review on Crusader Kings III. For this review specifically, there are some caveats that will be relevant to my overall approach to the review, and I wanted to address them at the beginning so that veterans of Crusader Kings II and new players of Crusader Kings III alike will understand where I am coming from when I talk about certain subjects of this game. When it comes to the Crusader Kings franchise, I have about 30 to 35 hours of game time in Crusader Kings II. I came into the game way too late for it to be very approachable in my opinion, and even with all the tutorials out there, I honestly just had a difficult time grasping the scope of the game as a whole and lost the will to really push through and learn it. This means that I was, by all means, an entirely new player to the franchise coming into Crusader Kings III. Fast forward to the few days before release, and I'm at over 120 hours in Crusader Kings III, largely due to the tutorial series I was able to do in collaboration with Paradox Interactive. Since then, I have worked to create several tutorials that will go up on this channel, and I think I have at least a solid grasp of most concepts inside Crusader Kings III, with very few references to how they operated in Crusader Kings II. That all said, I will approach this review with the idea that I am playing the series pretty much for the first time. There will be things that I will miss in this review. The game is so huge, I cannot possibly review every aspect. So if I miss something that you were hoping I would address, I do sincerely apologize, and I hope that you leave it in the comments section so that way I can address it. I will also say this to the potential skeptics who may have already made up their mind about my bias. Regardless of my relationship with any developer or any publisher of any game, I've always been upfront in regards to how I approach my content. I am immensely grateful that I received such early access to the game, and I'm thankful to have created a tutorial series for Paradox. But I will be very honest in my review of the game. There are aspects of this game that I love, most of it, if I'm being honest, yet there are also things that I don't like, and there are some pretty big holes that need filled. I will always praise the things that work well, and I will critique the things that I think need work on. So this review will be my attempt at covering one of the largest grand strategy games on the market, the good and the bad. Hope you'll at least give me the chance. Let's dive in. What is Crusader Kings III? Crusader Kings III is the sequel to Crusader Kings II, released over 8 years ago, and the latest grand strategy title developed by Paradox Development Studio and published by Paradox Interactive. Set in the Middle Ages, it is your ultimate goal to make sure that your bloodline survives through the ages amidst wars, politics, schemes, and unforeseen events. Carefully craft marriages to gain lands, develop your lands to increase taxes, and probably most importantly, keep your vassals happy, ensuring that your family and your empire endures. As a grand strategy game, Crusader Kings III has two standout game design features that are in nearly all Paradox grand strategy titles. First, there is no set goal or win condition in CK3, it is completely up to you. Just want to rule one small island? Sure, go ahead. Want to rule an entire continent? That'll take time, yes, but still doable. There are decisions that every character you play can achieve, which will unlock in-game achievements and bring about historical events or things that never happened that could have happened under a more competent ruler. But none of these decisions will bring you to an in-game screen per se. The second feature is that in CK3, you can play almost as literally any kind of land-owning character that is above a baron. If you want to start out with one single county, you can absolutely do that. And the idea of an underdog rising to the top is definitely one that resonates in this game and with this community. Again, it might take you significantly longer to achieve your goal the smaller you start, but it is up to you. You can start by ruling a significantly large chunk of land and see if you can hold it together under the current systems. It is truly up to the player. This flexibility lets you craft a completely unique experience that for the most part will not be replicated if you play it again. Each character on the map has their own agendas, and most will strive to become more than where they started, and it's this idea that plays heavily into the unexpected side of Crusader Kings III, much like in any Paradox game. One playthrough, you may see a more historical lineup of progression, But then the next, France might occupy half of the Holy Roman Empire in Italy, but Brittany is split between Novgorod, Muslim Seville, and King Alfred of England. While this is a very general overview of Crusader Kings III, let's dig deeper into a couple of more detailed aspects of the game. Paradox games are notorious for their complexity of design and display, with tons of information at once if it somewhat lacks in the explaining side of it all. And a big downside of newer players that were trying to get into CK2 in the last few years was how dated and cumbersome the user interface was. It was one of the biggest reasons I never truly got into the game. CK3 is a massive leap forward in about every area of UI. The main game user interface panels and icons, all the things featured on your main screen, do a great job of keeping relevant tabs clearly visible, clean in design, and available to be used while out of the way until you actually need to click on them. The coordination between color palettes, font choices, and contrast between the text and background graphics allow for very easy readability and fits to the overarching theme of the game as well. There was rarely ever a time while playing that I could not easily read an event or a tooltip or a list of traits and modifiers, and that's an impressive job with the vast scope of information that can be present at any given time. Considering that vast amount of information, CK3 has also really stepped up the UI game in explaining why things are the way they are and the accessibility of that information. For instance, any light blue highlighted text in the game is a tooltip trigger. Hovering over it brings up relevant information to the subject. When I hover over vassal, it brings up what that is, along with more highlighted text about what a ruler is or what a vassal provides. When I then hover over that, it brings up that relevant tooltip with more information that I can then open up another. Nested tooltips are a godsend, and they allow you to dig into subjects that require multiple levels of understanding without backing completely out to search for another term to open up another piece of UI design. It's all pretty smooth. You can easily get lost in them without a doubt, but it's quick and simple to get out of, and you're not having to mash escape a couple hundred times or click on tiny X's, and that's made life in this game much less stressful. Rolling along with that is the addition of a cyclopedia, an easily searchable database containing every bit of information that can be found in a tooltip and divided into subjects for even more ease of access. I found myself using this encyclopedia more times than I can count, and both this and the tooltips will be such an incredible step towards progress in making this game easier to step into for new players and veterans alike. One of the last areas regarding specifically to UI that have been crafted very well lies in modifiers. Hover over about any numerical value you see in this game, and you will always get a detailed breakdown of how that number came to be. Whether it's 2 modifiers or 12, everything is broken down to give you exactly why that is the final value. For general strategy players, that might seem a bit overboard, but when you're needing to find out why a vassal hates you so much, or why your county is only making 2 gold a month instead of 5, every modifier matters because you have the ability to influence that value through various means. Now, even with the praise in the UI, CK3 still struggles with explaining a lot of concepts or factors within the game, mainly in the way of how traits are actually given or removed from any character. I fully understand that having a tooltip for every single aspect would be an astronomical feat of writing and, well, engineering, but if there's a way to lose a negative trait through specific actions or gaining positive ones, then that system should be visible and understood through tooltips or in the encyclopedia. Thrones of Britannia had this encyclopedia type system where you could see, okay, if I win X number of battles in a row, I will gain a commander trait, etc., etc. It was very helpful and something I wish was in this game since it's so focused on traits. And even with the copious amount of information in this game, most players will simply need to spend some time reading and researching various aspects of the game. So a fair heads up on those watching, reading is absolutely going to be a big part of your time here, even if your leader isn't so great at it. Game design. The user interface of CK3 obviously plays heavily into game design, so this section will indeed have some overlap. What's drastically different about Crusader Kings III from its predecessor is how alive the game feels, from varied terrain, both in elevation and foliage, to better animations with fighting characters, city sounds when you zoom in, and yes, having all characters moving around and reacting to various events. The updated graphics overall enhance the quality of the game, and as mentioned before, are a huge enticement to the franchise. I know several people who will endure a steep learning curve if it means playing a game that simply looks fantastic, which this does. My favorite part of the design has to be the zoom levels of the map as well as the map modes. The transition from the details to the political map is both seamless and gorgeous, and then from the political to what I would call the tabletop mode is a nice unique way to watch the world transform before your eyes through a medieval artistic style of map design. I am very thankful for the titles modes specifically, as they really allowed me to get an idea on future expansions and how close I was to achieving certain titles in terms of land grabs. If there is a rather large hole in the map modes, it lies with modes like diplomacy status, ruler opinion, gold generation, even supply limits. If I remember correctly, these type of map modes have always been in all Paradox strategy games, and at least a few of those are pretty essential for quick ideas on figuring out which rulers hate you or where your allies hold land, and especially supply lines. I used that a lot with Imperator Rome and have needed it several times while playing CK3. I'm not sure why some of those were left out. Was it because no one really used them in previous games? Simple oversight? Maybe even locked behind DLC? I would really like to know. To wrap up game design, the overall feel and performance of playing Crusader Kings III is rather smooth. With my current specs of an i7-8700K, a 1080 Ti, and 16 GB of RAM, I rarely hit below 70 FPS playing on the best graphics and in 4K full screen. Even when there's a lot going on at once, CK3 handles it with very little in the way of lag or frame stuttering, at least from what I've seen so far. The improvements from the last game are very evident, to which I am thankful. Character development and interaction. The Crusader Kings franchise has always been more about the characters in the game, rather than the empire building that is Europa Universalis. It's no different with Crusader Kings III. Character development is the name of the game here, where both your reactions and your purposeful intentions shape not just your own character, but those around you. What plays the heaviest role in your campaign are traits and skills. Traits are the core of a character's development, usually determined by their childhood and sticking with them throughout their entire lives. These traits are the foundation of your character, and while you can rarely determine them in your starting character, as head of your family and therefore the head of your children, you can have a decently direct influence over how they develop their traits, in which you might take over as one of them once you die. If traits are the foundation of your character, your lifestyle choices are the building that is constructed on top of it. Lifestyle choices are skill trees that take you down the path of progression in your own character as they go through life in your hands. While preferring a certain lifestyle focus, you can obviously choose whatever you want, with perks unlocking various aspects of improvements to every area of the game, from empire benefits like more taxes and faster building, to character modifiers. Fulfilling an entire skill tree will unlock an actual trait as well, and they're honestly all worth the investment and a very worthwhile mechanic of the game for me in my time playing. The combination of traits and lifestyles will define their personality, their odd quirks, their mental state of being, and how they are expected to behave, which is epitomized in those skill numbers as well, with high numbers meaning your character is more suited in certain areas of life and you should play to those without a doubt. This in turn will dictate literally every interaction between every single character in the game, and will determine who you ally with, marry your children or siblings off to, which one of your vassals you really need to keep an eye on, or even who might decide to overthrow you or kill you and your family. When you don't play to your traits, stress happens, and it can have some decently swift and crucial consequences to your campaign. With 3 levels of stress, the higher it goes, the more likely that disastrous things would occur. I've never gone above stress level 1, and that was risky enough for me. I can't imagine what would happen at stress level 3, although since this is Crusader Kings, no doubt it's gotta be juicy, potentially bloody, and maybe even campaign ending. Stress is a great modifier that I'm happy to see in the game. It is a natural force to limit your actions to what type of ruler you currently are, and it places just that much more importance on the skills that are developed. From what I saw in CK2, you could easily go against, say, your virtuous trait and see very little happen in the way of consequences. Now you really have to play your cards close, and only when absolutely necessary risk that stress factor to achieve a more sinister objective. It's hard to fully explain the vast amount of things you can do from a character perspective for the purpose of this review, but I've written a sort of potential scenario that you could get. You can marry your club-footed brother off to a gluttonous princess to secure an alliance with an important faction in order to wage war against your in-game rival, who happens to follow a different religion, thus giving you a religious war casus belli, while wooing your neighbor's very fertile queen to have an affair and potentially father a lot of illegitimate children right after you imprisoned and tortured your largest warmongering vassal for trying to overthrow you, but not before you forced another deviant vassal to give you more levies because you had a hook on him from finding out he was into something involving goats, and at the same time giving your younger son, who's honest and an adept commander, the heirship to the throne due to your eldest son's lunacy caused when he almost died as a child because you made him take part in the assassination of your then liege that involved poisonous gold coins and hiding in the woods. Where's your wife in all of this? Well, after she gave birth to your 11th child in as many years, you finally let her help run your empire by sending her off with your steward to visit the realm. She's been gone for 13 months straight and is now pregnant, which obviously cannot possibly be by you. You find out that not only is your very close friend Archbishop the father, but the steward you sent her off with has become very good friends with one of your vassals who has convinced him that your most prosperous county should really be his, staking a claim. And now a few of your local vassals around him now support the idea of independence. Later that night, you wake up to a noise in your chambers, and before you can react, that fertile queen we talked about, she's in bed with you, and her quick reaction saved your life as she plants a knife in your wife to prevent her from killing you. And yes, that is a small taste of what can happen in Crusader Kings III. The success or failure in every single one of the things I just mentioned revolves almost entirely on traits of characters. This side of the game definitely blew me away, and it's something that I honestly will never get an entirely full grasp of. It's a bit mind-boggling that my traits can have such an impact on another character I may not have ever heard of. But I killed his thrice-removed cousin in a war 10 years ago, so he hates me. Or my wife, even though carrying a baby not of my own blood, is insanely jealous of a fling and tries to kill me. There are plenty of surprises that have occurred in my campaigns, and while they may seem forced or unlikely, if you pause and look at the character that you are now having to immediately deal with, more often than not you can see, through his or her traits and opinions, why he or she has chosen to do the thing they're doing. It's not on the level of actual human interaction and justification, it is all numbers and hard factors after all, but going back to the feeling that CK3 is alive, the characters in this game certainly feel that way. The only real beef I had with characters in this game is that there was very little diplomatic engagement from the other side of characters. I rarely received an offer for an alliance. I never got a marriage offer from the AI. The only approachable subjects from the other characters were alliance requests to join wars, or to go to a feast of my vassals, and a very small handful of other events. It's a bit one-sided in that regard. And while I'm pretty sure you'd probably get 1,000 offers of marriage if the AI was able to do so, there has to be some way to make this a two-way conversation without the players always being the one who initiates conversation. Empire management and war. This side of Crusader Kings III is much simpler to comprehend, mainly because everything that goes on in empire management and wars is a result of the character interactions previously discussed. Running your empire basically breaks down to running your own lands, making your vassals run theirs, and expanding to get more land. You of course do not have to expand and go to war, but let's face it, you're gonna go to war eventually. Inside your empire, I found buildings in your lands to be the least of your worries, but that probably has more to do with it being the early game aspect of your campaign, and no doubt as you progress, you will have the funds and the ability to really dig into creating wealth through your own lands. It's not that the buildings are useless. In fact, several of them are very worthwhile when considering the strategic long game. I simply haven't made it far enough into a single campaign to have enough accumulated wealth to begin that economical side. What will end up soaking up a lot of time is managing vassals, especially as your empire grows. Keeping vassals happy is the name of the empire game. Happy vassals typically mean no happy little accidents of you getting a knife in the back. It does tend to get overwhelming the more vassals you get, but once you figure out a few key things, it becomes more about timing and a constant eye on them. With actions like council seats, gifting smaller vassals to larger ones, and even the good old scheme to sway, I've found that vassals are complex but easy to control. Again, as long as you keep a pretty consistent tab on them. Much like with any character interactions, the relationship with your vassals is expansive, leaving you with plenty of options to deal positively or negatively in order to keep them in line. There were plenty of times it got out of control for me, I'm not gonna lie, but it wasn't because it was beyond the scope to control in a general game mechanic sense, rather a lack of knowledge and capability on my part. You have to remember, each one of your vassals has their own motivations and aspirations with a family and friend-foe system like every other character. It creates a very dynamic system that is very much enjoyable and one that I'm eager to get nailed down completely. There are, of course, some pretty serious things I want to address with regards to vassal management, namely in the mechanics of governing types, but I'll address these shortly in the next section of the review. When it comes down to warfare, I have some mixed feelings overall. Warfare in CK3 does have its complexity and dynamic functions. The ability to take on knights that will have a deep impact on the success of your battles. Terrain advantages, lifestyle choices, allies, and the combat ability of you personally or your vassals will play a rather big role in how quickly you can expand or simply just engage in warfare. The levy and men-at-arms systems seems to work pretty efficiently as well, and I do really like the economy balance of monetary income between peacetime and war, as it gives you an incentive to prioritize your wars or potentially risk going into debt. Rarely will a war ever be over quickly due to the simple nature of the mechanics, and most of the time I've acted rather rash to try and force that quick end because I didn't pay attention to how much my army cost me when they are fully up and running. While I don't remember the mechanics of warfare in CK2, and it's been ages since I last played EU4, I do feel that actual combat feels a bit bland and something just feels off or missing. There is a decent number of modifiers happening with every stage and role of battle, and I don't believe that's what's bugging me. I actually quite like the ability to see the breakdown of why I'm losing or winning a battle, and it has helped me understand the importance of unit types and terrain without a doubt. However, I really do wish I could put my finger on what I feel is missing, yet a lack of experience from CK2 is really pushing through in this area, and for that, I simply apologize. But just know, in my opinion, something's not quite right, and while I enjoyed combat and wars, it's not complete. An incomplete game. So it's fair to say that I enjoy playing this game, and it is true, I very much love the game and most of what it offers so far. Yet there's some pretty serious, obvious content that's intentionally left out, and any Paradox player knows what that means: DLC. For those that do not know, Paradox's business strategy involves releasing a base game, then in turn dropping loads of DLC to enhance things like commerce, diplomacy, or warfare, and flesh out different cultures, religions, and factions. Now, personally, I fully understand the business side of this DLC structure. It has worked insanely well for Paradox over the last decade, and I'm not here to moan and complain about that policy. It is what it is, and nothing is going to change their mind. However, what bugs me is the very obvious holes in the game it creates, the fact I know where DLC is going to fill that gap. Feudal governments are the only vassal type that can be modified through contracts. Not only can you not modify a republic or a theology-based vassal, you cannot even play as one. That right there is at least 2 future DLCs. There are a very small handful of troop types in the game at the moment, and regardless of culture or geography, you all have access to the same exact troops, barring a few exceptions, even using the same unit card to show them off. The same goes for building variation, both in the scope of actually building things and the graphical variation on the campaign map. That is a lot of culture DLC packs coming in the future. When it comes to trade, there is 0 in the game, at least none that I can tell whatsoever. Guarantee you there's a DLC behind that too. Again, I'm not complaining about the business model. It's just so blatant where mechanics are straight up missing and future content is going to be. And while there are so many things to do in this game right now from the start, I know there's going to be so much more, and therefore, despite being full of content now, it does feel just a bit like an incomplete release. That's obviously not going to stop me from playing it, but it is a potential concern for new players to the Paradox Grand Strategy genre. If you are going to play this game to its fullest over the next, 5 to 10 years, it is going to be a significant investment compared to other games. Luckily, Paradox is good about their spacing and pretty decent pricing of their DLCs, so you're rarely forking over tons of money in quick succession. And if Imperator is any kind of model to go by in regards to free updates, CK3 will get some very good love and attention for free as well. So, what are my final thoughts on Crusader Kings III coming in as a quote-unquote new player? Crusader Kings III is an exciting title that has been several years in the making. The hype surrounding the announcement trailer alone spurred me to play my short stint in CK2, so I know there are tons of gamers just like me, eager but also oh so unprepared to play. What Crusader Kings III does immensely better than previous games is present a very approachable game for new players through its design and current mechanics. There is a crazy amount of possibilities in this game, so you're never going to have the same game twice. Character development is fun, stressful, engaging, and infuriating all in one, while still catering a decent bit to the empire management junkies that want to rule the entire world. You will encounter things that don't make sense, aspects you can't access, people you cannot play as, or mechanics that just feel like they should be there, which, again, knowing Paradox, means a lot of DLC is coming that is very apparent, so if you get in, prepare your wallet for the future. The future is bright though. I wouldn't put 120 hours into a game just for kicks and giggles. This is an easy recommendation for me because of its depth and replayability. Paradox has really catered to the hype and giving us a game I can't wait to play for the next 10 years. That's it for my review on Crusader Kings III. As a non-veteran, I hope that I covered most of what Crusader Kings is about. If not, again, let me know what you would like to have seen or known about, and I will do my best to respond with my experiences in that area. If you are new or experienced, I will be consistently putting up tutorials and guides on various aspects of this game, so I highly encourage you to check out the channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're always up to date with the latest videos. Lastly, if you have yet to buy the game, there are two big wins if you want to buy it. First, it is available on the Xbox Game Pass for PC. For just $5 a month, you can have full access to the CK3 base game and several other fantastic strategy games. It's hands down the best win for you, the consumer. If you would rather help support the channel and give myself a big win, I would love it if you would check out my custom game store through Nexus GG. This is a legitimate key selling site where I curate what games are for sale based on what my audience wants to see, not a generic site with thousands of games on it. When you buy, you get to see exactly how much I will make from your sale. It's a fantastic way of showing some love for a content creator, but it is in no way expected of you, especially with that Games Pass deal. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below. This is Havoc, welcome to Crusader Kings III, and I will see you in the next video.